It was one of those quiet evenings, just me, my thoughts, and the usual noise of the city outside. I had finished dinner, cleaned up the kitchen, and was about to settle into my usual evening routine when the phone rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I picked up with a hint of curiosity. "Hey James, it's Seth, your neighbor." The voice was familiar, carrying a slightly excited tone. "I hope you're doing well. I was wondering if you'd like to come over for dinner tonight. Mary, my wife, and I are making something simple. You're welcome to join us." I didn't talk to Seth much, beyond the occasional wave in the hallway, but something in his voice made me feel like I should say yes. Not that I had anything against them, it was just unexpected. Sure, I said, hesitating for just a second. "What time?" 7 o'clock, Seth replied. "Nothing fancy, just good food and good company. We'd really love to have you over." I was a bit surprised, but I figured it would be a nice change. A casual dinner sounded good, especially since I had planned on spending the evening alone. "All right, I'll see you at 7, I agreed, hanging up and tossing my phone onto the couch. Glancing at the clock, I saw that I had enough time to grab a bottle of wine on my way to their place. As I walked to the store, my mind wandered, why was Seth inviting me? Was it just a friendly gesture, or was there something more? I shrugged off the thought. Whatever it was, I didn't want to overthink it. I picked out a bottle of red wine, not too expensive, but good enough to bring. I wasn't sure what to expect, but the least I could do was bring a gift. At 6:55 p.m., I stood outside their door, the bottle in my hand. Taking a deep breath, I knocked. The door opened almost immediately, and Seth stood there, his face lighting up with a warm smile. "James. So glad you could make it," he said enthusiastically, stepping aside to let me in. "Come on in, Mary just finished dinner. I'll get you a drink." I stepped inside, greeted by the cozy atmosphere of their apartment. The kitchen smelled amazing, something warm and inviting. Seth led me to the living room, where the dining table was already set. 3 candles flickered softly, casting a welcoming glow around the room. "Thanks for inviting me," I said, placing the wine on the table. "Of course. It's been a while since we had guests over, and it'll be nice to relax and enjoy the evening." Before I could respond, Mary appeared from the kitchen. She was wearing a simple dress, her hair loosely tied back, and she looked as warm and welcoming as Seth. She smiled at me, her eyes sparkling with warmth. "James, it's so great to finally have you over," she said, stepping forward and wrapping me in a hug. "I hope you're hungry." "I really am," I replied, returning the hug. "It smells amazing in here." "Just something simple," Mary laughed. "I hope you like it." As we sat down at the table, I felt at ease. The conversation flowed effortlessly. Seth asked about my job, and Mary shared stories about her favorite recipes. The wine helped smooth everything out, and before long, we were all laughing and enjoying ourselves. "To good food and great company," Seth said, raising his glass. We toasted and enjoyed the meal, simple but delicious, the kind of food you crave after a long day. But as the evening went on, I started noticing something strange. Mary kept looking at me in a different way. There was a subtle glimmer in her eyes, something that made me uneasy, though I couldn't quite place it. After a while, Seth got up to get more wine, leaving Mary and me alone at the table. As soon as he left the room, she turned to me, a playful smile on her lips. "You know, James," she began, her voice soft, "I've been thinking about something." I raised an eyebrow, unsure where this was going. "What is it?" She leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I'm really glad you came tonight. You're different. I don't mean to make you uncomfortable, but I feel like we have a special connection. I want to get to know you more, just the two of us." My heart skipped a beat, and I couldn't help but feel a bit thrown off. Was she really saying what I thought she was saying? This didn't seem like just a friendly conversation. She glanced around the room, making sure Seth wasn't coming back yet, then continued. "Let's keep this between us, okay? I think you're the kind of man I'd like to know, in a more private way." Her words hung in the air, thick, heavy with unspoken meaning. I was caught off guard, my mind racing. I didn't know how to react. This wasn't what I had expected when I agreed to dinner. Before I could respond, Seth returned with more wine, breaking the moment. Mary quickly pulled back, a small smile flickering on her lips as if nothing had happened. Seth poured us more wine, completely unaware of the tension in the air. "So, James, how's work going?" he asked, oblivious to how uncomfortable I felt. I tried to focus on the conversation, but my mind kept replaying Mary's words. What was I supposed to do with this? Should I say something? Should I confront her about what just happened? I decided to stay silent for now, unsure of what to do. I just wanted to get through the evening without making things more awkward. As the night went on, the conversation became more relaxed, and the tension started to fade. But deep down, I knew this night wasn't as simple as it had first seemed. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Seth and I talked about work, sports, the usual guy stuff, but I couldn't shake the feeling of what had just happened between Mary and me. Every time I glanced at her, I noticed her gaze lingered a little too long. She still smiled, but her expression was softer now, more intentional. And every time she looked at me, there was something deeper in her eyes, something that confused me. Seth didn't seem to notice anything unusual. He was fully engaged in our conversation, laughing at my jokes, sharing stories about their recent trip. Meanwhile, Mary, though still part of the conversation, seemed preoccupied. Her eyes would flick toward me whenever Seth wasn't looking, and there was a hint of something unspoken in her expression. I wasn't sure how to interpret it. Was I overthinking? Was she just being friendly, or was there something more? I tried to focus on the evening, but every time our eyes met, a sense of unease crept over me. At one point, Mary excused herself to go to the bathroom. Seth watched her leave, a lazy smile on his face. I couldn't help but wonder, how much did he actually know about what was going on? Did he notice Mary looking at me? Was he completely unaware of the tension between us? No. I pushed the thought aside, trying to stay in the moment. But I couldn't stop thinking about it, Mary's whispered words. "Let's keep this between us." What had she meant by that? Why would she say something like that with her husband just a few feet away? The more I thought about it, the more uncomfortable I felt. I wasn't the type to do anything that could ruin a marriage, especially not for something fleeting and wrong. Even if Mary had made it clear she wanted more. I excused myself to the bathroom to collect my thoughts. Standing in the small room, I leaned against the sink and stared at myself in the mirror. What had I gotten myself into? Should I confront this or ignore it and pretend nothing happened? I stood there for a moment, trying to process everything. I didn't want to betray Seth's trust, but I also didn't want to put myself in a difficult position. I had no interest in a romantic entanglement with Mary. Not like this. But why was she acting this way? As I was lost in thought, I heard footsteps approaching. The bathroom door creaked open, and Mary stood there, her expression unreadable. "I thought I heard you in here," she said softly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Her presence in the small space suddenly felt overwhelming. The air between us grew thick, and I felt the tension rise. I started, but my words trailed off as she quietly shut the door behind her. "You know," she began, her voice gentle yet cautious, "I really enjoy your company, James. You're different. I don't know why, but there's something about you that I can't ignore." I swallowed hard, unsure of what to say. "Mary, this isn't a good idea," I stammered, my heart pounding. "You're married to Seth. Whatever this is, it has to stop. We can't." She cut me off, stepping closer, her hand gently brushing against my arm. "I know," she whispered. "But that's why it has to be just between us. Just one night, James. One night, and then we'll never speak of it again." I felt the weight of her words, the gravity of the situation pressing down on me. This wasn't just harmless flirting, she was serious. And I was terrified. "Mary, you don't understand," I said firmly. This isn't something I can be part of. You're married. You need to talk to Seth about whatever you're feeling. This isn't something we can keep secret. She sighed, her hand slipping away as she stepped back, disappointment etched across her face. I didn't think you'd understand, she muttered, her tone shifting. I just thought, maybe this time, someone would see me. Someone would care. I felt a pang of sympathy, but I quickly pushed it aside. I'm sorry, Mary, but this isn't the way to fix things. You need to talk to your husband, not me. She said nothing more. Instead, she turned and walked out of the bathroom, leaving me standing there, my heart still racing. I felt torn, between my loyalty to Seth and my sympathy for Mary. But deep down, I knew I had made the right choice. I would not betray my friend. Especially not for something that wasn't real. I held my breath for the rest of the evening, unsure of what would happen next, but certain that I couldn't let this go any further. I needed to find a way to leave, to distance myself before things escalated. As I stepped out of the bathroom and back into the living room, Seth was still chatting, completely unaware of the tension that had just unfolded. When I sat down, I knew I had to act normal, pretend everything was fine. But in my mind, I was racing to figure out what to do next. For the next few minutes, I forced myself to engage in conversation, to smile and nod at the right moments. Seth talked about work, while Mary sat across from us, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation in the bathroom. I couldn't stop replaying her words or the way she had looked at me, pleading, as if I were her only hope of escape. But I knew better. I couldn't be that person. I had to be strong. I had to remember who I was and what I stood for. This wasn't about me. It wasn't about what Mary wanted. It was about respect. Respect for her marriage. Respect for Seth. And most importantly, respect for myself. Seth didn't seem to notice any change in the atmosphere. He was too wrapped up in stories about his business trip, his colleagues, his weekend plans. He had no idea about the growing tension between his wife and me. And a part of me was grateful for that. I didn't want to make things uncomfortable. But I also knew it was only a matter of time before I had to deal with what had happened. The evening dragged on, and I found myself becoming more and more uneasy. The conversations felt forced. The laughter felt hollow. Every time I glanced at Mary, she was looking at me with that same uneasy expression. I could feel her presence in the room like a weight pressing down on me. Finally, the night came to an end. Seth stood up, stretching his arms with a satisfied sigh. I think it's time for bed, he said with a yawn. We have to be up early tomorrow, and I don't want to be dragging all day. I nodded, relieved to have a reason to leave. I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep up this act. Mary stood up with Seth, but before I could make it to the door, she stepped toward me. Her eyes were soft, her expression almost apologetic. She looked at me for a long moment, and for the first time that night, I saw a flicker of guilt in her gaze. I'm sorry, she said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. I shouldn't have said what I said earlier. I didn't mean to make things awkward. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. I didn't know how to respond. A part of me wanted to tell her it was okay, that I understood. But I knew better. I had to stand my ground. It's not about what you said, Mary, I said calmly but firmly. It's about respect. You need to talk to Seth about whatever you're feeling. I can't be a part of this. This isn't something we should keep between us. She nodded slowly, her lips trembling slightly. I know, she whispered. I don't know what's wrong with me. Seth and things aren't the same anymore. And I guess I just got caught up in the moment. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Mary, I understand. But this isn't how you fix things. You need to talk to him, not me. She looked down, her shoulders slumping in defeat. For a moment, I thought she might break down right there. But instead, she just nodded and stepped away. I watched her go, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. I knew it wasn't my place to fix things for her. But I couldn't help feeling bad. She looked so lost, so desperate for something she wasn't going to find in the wrong place. Seth clapped me on the back. "Hey, man, it was great having you over. We should do this again sometime." I forced a smile and nodded. "Yeah, for sure," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Thanks for having me." I could feel the weight of the night pressing down on me, but I pushed it aside. I had to get out of there before I made things worse. As I grabbed my coat and headed for the door, I caught one last glimpse of Mary. She was standing by the window, her back to me, staring out into the night. I couldn't help but feel sorry for her. I knew she was struggling with something, but I also knew there was nothing I could do. I had to let her figure it out on her own. As I stepped out into the cold night air, I exhaled a shaky breath. I had escaped the tension, but the feeling didn't last. I knew I wouldn't be able to forget what had happened. It would stay with me, running through my mind until I figured out what to do next. Had I done the right thing? Maybe I could have been more understanding. Maybe I could have tried to help her in some other way. But one thing I knew for certain, I couldn't betray Seth. I couldn't betray his trust. As I drove home, I replayed the night's events over and over in my head. What had gone wrong? Why had Mary acted the way she did? I didn't have all the answers. But I knew I had done what I had to do. Now, I just had to figure out what to do next. The drive home felt like it lasted forever. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting Mary to somehow appear behind me. But there was nothing. Just the empty, dark road stretching out ahead of me. It was surreal, driving away from the night I had just experienced. I tried to shake the image of her standing by the window, shoulders slumped in defeat. I didn't want to think about her. But I couldn't stop. I felt the weight of the situation pressing down on me once again. I wasn't sure how to handle this, but I knew one thing for certain, I couldn't let it continue. I couldn't let her disrespect Seth, and I couldn't let myself get dragged into something that would destroy everything I cared about. The next few days passed in a blur. I went to work, came home, and tried to focus on my own life. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mary's face, her eyes pleading with me for something more. And every time I saw a message from Seth, I felt like a coward for not doing more. I kept telling myself it wasn't my problem, but deep down, I knew that was a lie. I was involved in this, and I couldn't walk away. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had failed in some way. Maybe I should tell Seth. Maybe I should come clean about everything. But what good would that do? If I did, their relationship would fall apart, and I wasn't ready to be the one to destroy everything. At the same time, I couldn't escape the feeling that I was letting Mary down. She needed help, and I had turned my back on her. But she wasn't asking for my help in the right way. She didn't want to fix her marriage, she wanted something from me that I couldn't give her. And more than anything, that made me realize just how complicated everything had become. By the weekend, I had made my decision. I needed to talk to Mary. I needed to make sure she understood that what she was doing was wrong, that she couldn't keep going like this. But I couldn't do it alone, I had to bring Seth into this. I had to face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. It wouldn't be easy, but it was the only way to put an end to all of this. I called her. "Mary," I said when she answered. "We need to talk." There was silence for a moment before she spoke. "I know," she said softly. "I've been thinking about that too. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for things to get this complicated. I don't know what happened to me." "Mary, this isn't about what you said. This is about your marriage. This is about what you're willing to do to fix it," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm not the one who can help you with this. You need to talk to Seth. You need to be honest with him." "I know," she said again, almost in a whisper. I don't know how to fix it." I could hear the desperation in her voice, and for a moment, I felt sorry for her. But I couldn't let that cloud my judgment. "You need to fix it with him, Mary. Not with me. I know, she repeated. And then there was a long silence. I'll talk to him. I promise. I let out a sigh, feeling a strange mix of relief and guilt. I wasn't sure if I had done the right thing, but I knew it was the only thing I could do. I wasn't responsible for their marriage. I couldn't fix it. Only they could. I'll talk to him, she said again, her voice more certain this time. Thank you for listening. I hung up, feeling like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. But I knew this wasn't over yet. The next few days felt like a whirlwind, one moment blending into the next as I tried to move on with my life. But I couldn't escape it. My conversation with Mary had left a mark on me. I couldn't pretend it hadn't happened. Every time I saw Seth or Mary, I could feel the tension between us, like everything had changed in a way I couldn't control. It was Friday night, and I was sitting on my couch, staring at the blank TV screen. I didn't want to watch anything. I didn't want to do anything. My mind was still haunted by thoughts of what I had done and what was about to happen. The phone call with Mary had given me closure, but it had also left me with questions. Would she really change? Would she follow through on her promise to talk to Seth? I wasn't sure. But I knew one thing, I had trusted her to handle her own situation. It was out of my hands now. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts. I wasn't expecting anyone. Getting up, I walked to the door and opened it, only to see Seth standing there, a smile on his face. Hey, man. Got a minute? He asked casually, as if nothing had happened. Sure, I said, stepping aside to let him in. I didn't know why he was here, but a part of me was afraid of what was coming. As soon as he stepped inside, his usual cheerful demeanor faltered. I could sense an underlying tension in his eyes. I've been thinking, Seth said, sitting down on the couch. About the other night. About Mary. I don't know what's going on with her lately. She's been distant, and I can't figure it out. A lump formed in my throat. This was the moment, where everything could either be fixed or fall apart completely. Seth, I started carefully, choosing my words. I think you deserve to know the truth. There's something you need to know. He looked at me, confused. What do you mean? I talked to Mary, I said, feeling my pulse quicken. And I think she's going through something. Something she can't bring herself to tell you. But it's not what you think. Seth's expression flickered, but he quickly regained his composure with a small smile. What are you talking about? I'm not the one who can tell you everything, I replied, keeping my voice calm. But you need to talk to her. She's struggling. And it's not just about your relationship, it's more than that. Seth's face darkened. For the first time, I saw the vulnerability behind his usual confidence. He was hurt. He was confused. But he wasn't angry, not yet. What happened? He asked, his voice quieter now. I took a deep breath, knowing this was the hardest part. Mary, she's made some choices she shouldn't have. She's lost, Seth. I'm not the one who can fix this for you, but I can tell you that she's dealing with something much deeper than just your marriage. Seth leaned back against the couch, processing my words. His silence was deafening. I could tell he didn't know how to react or how to handle this truth. After a long moment, he spoke again. Do you think there's still hope for us? He asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. I hesitated, unsure of how to answer. I don't know. I really don't. But I think you deserve to know what's going on. And you deserve to make the choice, to fight for your marriage or to walk away. That's not a decision I can make for you. Seth nodded slowly, taking it all in. Thanks for being honest with me, he said. I guess I need to talk to her. I just don't know if I'm ready to face it. I looked at him, feeling the weight of the situation hanging between us. I've done what I could. I've told the truth. Now, it's up to Seth and Mary to find their own way. I'll talk to her, Seth said quietly as he stood up. I don't know how, but I'll figure it out. I stood up with him, placing a hand on his shoulder. You don't have to do it alone. But you do have to make the decision for yourself. No one can force you. Seth gave me a weak smile and nodded. I appreciate it. He walked out the door, and I stood there, watching him go. The weight on my chest didn't disappear, but something inside me had changed. That night, my phone buzzed with a message from Mary. I talked to him. He's hurt, but he's willing to try. Thank you for being honest. I leaned back, feeling a strange sense of peace wash over me. It wasn't the resolution I had hoped for, but it was the best possible outcome. Mary had taken responsibility for her actions. And Seth had chosen to fight for his marriage. The future was uncertain. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had done the right thing. Sometimes, the right thing isn't easy. But it's always worth it.